Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live in Studio West. So pleased to welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show Admiral William McRaven, retired United States Navy, former head of course, Special Operations. Good morning, Admiral. Welcome back and congratulations. The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, another bestseller.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.
It is great to be with you. I want to begin with the conversation I had with my wife last night as we were talking about the wisdom of the bullfrog. We want to know if Georgianne went to Paris after you called her. The Run to the Sound of the Guns chapter, I paused and I said, military spouses are the most resilient people in the world. Would you tell that story and then tell us, did she go? My guess was not. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt thought maybe she did, and I hope she bought a scarf. But you tell us that that's not in the book.
Yeah, no, she didn't end up going, Hugh. That was so. For your readers, we had a kind of a horrible civilian casualty incident when I was in Afghanistan. I had been preparing I was going to get a little leave. I was going to go from Afghanistan and meet my wife in Paris, but I had to call her at the last minute and say, "Hey, honey, I can't leave now. This is when the troops need me. This is when I've got to show up. I've got to step up in front of the general who was in charge of me and be accountable for the mistakes we had and try to fix the problem." And as you well know, Hugh, we've been married a long time, and she understood that. And so, no, she and my daughter didn't go to Paris that time.
I am going to talk about a lot that's in the wisdom of the bullfrog, and I want to pause at the beginning, though, to salute military spouses, because every leadership lesson that you talk here that involves military action, there's an offstage set of actors, and it's the family of the participant. Whether they know what's going on or not, like in your case, you're able to explain to your wife why you were not going to Paris, though I'm sure I'm sure she understood. I just don't think people grasp what they deal with over a law. 37 years for you? 37 years of moving and not doing
Well, we've been married now. Yeah, well, we've been married for almost 45 years. This May, it'll be 45 years. But yeah, through 37 years of my time in the service, she was with me the whole time.
Well, and I just think this book pays tribute to them. Now let's go to the wisdom of the bullfrog. First, let's talk about the title. I've been around enough people in the military. I should know a lot of stuff that you reveal in here. I didn't know about the title bullfrog. I didn't know where it came from. Why don't you explain to people what that signifies?
Yeah, so the title bullfrog is given to the Navy SEAL who is the longest serving on active duty. So in 2011, I became the bullfrog, and I held the position for 3 years until I retired. Then you transfer it on. But remember, as Navy SEALs, we are first and foremost Navy frogmen. So from our World War II roots. So when you are the kind of oldest or most senior frogman, you are the bullfrog. Now, there's a little tongue-in-cheek there because part of it, you get this trophy, Hugh, that has this god-awful looking toad on the top of it. And I think part of the reason this is to say, hey, look, you may be the longest serving guy, but don't make too much of it. Don't take this too seriously. It's a great title. I'm appreciated. I'm appreciative of it. But when you see all the hard work that the troops are doing, you realize, it's a nice thing to have, but the troops' respect is more important than anything.
What I also got out of this, Admiral, is that you learn how to communicate after 37 years in the military and leadership at the University of Texas system by direct, succinct takeaways. So at the end of each chapter, other military writers do this. You summarize. So here's what you're going to learn. Here's what you're learning. And then that's what you just read. I love that approach. What did your publisher think about that?
Well, the publisher, he liked it as well. I mean, this is, to your point, this is an old adage in the military. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And it reinforces whatever the narrative is and what the lessons are. So I've lived with this my whole military career, and it just made sense to write the book that way.
All right, now I want to summarize for the audience out there that haven't ordered it yet. It's the perfect book for graduation. I assume that's why it's coming out in April, so that it's available for May graduations for everyone, because it's a life advice book that is actually full of nuggets. But the premise, which I found delightful, and I can't believe no one ever came up with it, is to take those slogans, mottos, not cliches, but condensed wisdom that have come from every branch of every service, and a few not, like Pope Francis at one point, and explain their origin. Was there not?
I'm sure it's been done. It's there's no such thing as an original thought. I think Plato said that, and probably somebody before Plato. But the point is, for me, as I tried to frame how I wanted people to think about leadership, it occurred to me, in my own career, is that these mottos and these creeds help guide me through challenging times. So whenever I had a hard decision to make, for example, I would ask myself, can you stand before the long green table? And the implication there was, if you can't make your case to the men and women who are judging you behind the long green table, which, this kind of started from World War II. The tables were long, they had green felt on them. If you can't make your case to reasonable men and women, then maybe you should rethink your actions or your decisions. Every time I was getting ready to do something, I'd say, hey, if I have to go justify my actions or my decisions, then I stand before the long green table. So these mottos, as you said, these quotes are important to guide people through tough leadership challenges.
I'd never heard the phrase, the long green table. And General Mattis is a guest, General McChrystal is a guest, Admiral Stab is on all the time. You've been on before. I've never heard that term. I got kids in the military. I've just never heard that term. Is it still in common use?
I don't think so. This was when I came into the military, actually, as a midshipman in 1973. I can remember some of the naval officers using it. And then my early days in the Navy. So to your point, I can understand how, General McChrystal and maybe even General Mattis, but I would think Jim Stavridis has heard this before because it's a term that I heard often in my time in the Navy. Not so much later on.
It's a warning. This is an admonition. This book is an admonition to every instructor at the Naval Academy. Your mids are going to remember what you talk about because you actually recount the Battle of Midway as told to you by the lieutenant instructor at the academy for the lesson about commanders got to command. I don't want to give away too much of the book, Admiral, so we got to tease and dance around. But I want you to tell that story about not only the instructor, but Nimitz. I've been to Chester's Nimitz house in Fredericksburg or Frederick, Texas. I've been to the Museum of the One, the Pacific, but I didn't know this. I did not know this about the Battle of Midway.
So I had heard this phrase a number of times in my career as well. When in command, command. And it goes back, and I don't know whether it is legend or mythology, but I could verify it as best I could. But in June of 1942, as Chester Nimitz, who is the fleet admiral, they are looking at the island of Midway and the Japanese fleet off there. And there is a lot of discussion about whether the U.S. Navy should go engage the Japanese off Midway. And there are a lot of people in Washington and a lot of people on Nimitz's staff that think this is a really bad idea. So he's really grappling with this problem. Should I go do this? He thinks it's the right thing to do, but there are a lot of other people think that it's not. So he goes to visit Admiral Bull Halsey in the hospital. Bull Halsey has got shingles. He's in the hospital. And, of course, Bull Halsey was this, kind of rough old admiral. And as he's talking to Halsey in his hospital bed, Halsey turns to him and says, Admiral, you always told me when in command, command. And the point being is, hey, you're the guy in charge or you're the woman in charge. Take charge. Make the best decision you can and move out. Don't waffle too much. Your instincts are probably something you should trust, and you need to be decisive. And this is about being decisive. People like decisive leaders. And of course, Nimitz goes on to make the decision to engage the Japanese off Midway, and it's a turning point in the Pacific War.
I contrasted that with McClellan and Grant, and I was going back through my Civil War history. McClellan was in command, but he didn't command when he needed to in the Peninsular Campaign. Grant did nothing except we intend to remain on this line if it takes all summer, right? Always attack. And so that's the personification of that. Does that change at all when the unknowns outweigh the knowns? Because Rumsfeld, the former secretary, was very famous for knowing there are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns. When does that balance shift?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hugh. Another part of the book is about risk, and so I think that they are complementary when you think about when in command, and then recognizing that who dares wins. You're going to have to assume some risk. But the one thing I tell folks is there's this mistaken belief out there that as Navy SEALs, we just kind of grab our guns and go run to do the mission. And what people don't see in the movies, and of course what they don't read in the books, is the fact that 3/4 of our time is spent planning and rehearsing. You want to take. There's always going to be risk in every mission, but you want to train and reduce the risk to a manageable level. And so part of this is, yes, you want to be decisive, but you don't want to be cavalier either. So to your point, you've got to look at the battlefield. You've got to make a plan. You've got to work the risk out of the plan as best you can, but then you have to be decisive and move out.
So let's talk for a moment about the raid to get bin Laden. You pay a compliment to President Obama, which I had never really considered and which he deserves. There was enormous risk to him in authorizing that raid. It reminds me, of course, President Carter and the failed Desert One back in 1979. I think maybe it was 1980. So you actually underscore he had to brace up, swallow hard, and command. He was in command and he commanded. Took a while, but he commanded. In the end, and you pay him that compliment. I want my audience especially to know it's a deserved compliment.
Well, I appreciate that, Hugh. And again, I have worked for both, President George W. Bush and for President Obama. And it's interesting. People would think that they are completely different in their styles. But having sat in the Situation Room with both of them, they actually had similar styles, which was President Bush would welcome the principals sitting around the table to challenge his assumptions, to challenge his decision. And I found the same thing with President Obama. When he got there, he said, look, I think we should do the raid, but there were a lot of people in the room that didn't think they should do the raid. Because as I point out in the book, we didn't know whether it was bin Laden or not. So you think about this from President Obama's standpoint, and of course he understood the issue with President Carter. Jimmy Carter attempted the rescue of American hostages in Tehran, and it failed, and as a result, Jimmy Carter was a one-term president. We never discussed that in the Situation Room, but I am certain somebody, talked to the president and said, if this goes badly, this is the end of your political career, and oh, by the way, we could lose some Navy SEALs and helicopter pilots. And so the boldness of the decision, to me, as a military commander, was pretty impressive, because we just didn't know whether it was bin Laden, and he made the decision to go. So to your point, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, it was clearly a bold decision for a president.
I also want to tell people, this is not in the book. Admiral McRaven would never pat himself on the back this way, and I doubt it's even occurred to him. But I am reminded the night before D-Day, Eisenhower went to mingle with the troops. I think it was the 101st. It might have been the 82nd, but he went. It's a very famous photo of 101st. So the night before the bin Laden raid, you're out near the edge of the Afghan land and near the Pakistani border with your team and with the old grizzled sergeant who steps up and talks to him about it. And I think that is very much smelling like your sheep if you're a shepherd. That's a different chapter, but they came together for me.
Well, thanks. It was always an honor for me to spend time with the troops. And, I've told young officers before, I said, look, at the end of your career, whether you retire as a lieutenant commander or you're fortunate enough to become an admiral, the only thing that really matters is whether you have earned the respect of the men and women that work for you. Because you can be a senior officer, but if you don't have that respect, you know what? Your career is a little shallow. Conversely, you can be a sergeant major or a sergeant, and if you have earned the respect of the officers and the enlisted men and women that work for you, man, that's a great career.
Admiral, I want to talk now about one of the surprises for me. You mentioned Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire. Stephen is a friend. I've read all of his books. I think I like Killing Rommel second after Gates of Fire. And so Killing Rommel is actually based on your chapter, Who Dares Wins, the SAS motto, and the Phantom Major David Sterling. I confess ignorant. I did not know until I read the Wisdom of the Bullfrog that the SAS was misnamed intentionally. I always thought it had something to do with the strategic air. I had no idea until I read this. So have you read Killing Rommel, by the way, by Pressfield?
I have not, but of course I've read a whole lot about David Sterling, the founder of the SAS.
Well, tell people about that, because Who Dares Wins and the SAS is all founded in the reality of what they had to do to stop Rommel.
Yeah, so David Sterling was a young British captain at the time, I believe. He made it up to lieutenant colonel, but And so they were in the North Africa, and they were a commando unit. He was building this commando unit to go after Rommel. And Sterling had some, at the time, very unconventional ideas about how to do this. He was going to get in a bunch of Jeeps. He was going to parachute in. He had all these kind of what would be considered kind of crazy, unconventional ideas. But he also realized he needed a name for the unit. But he was afraid that if he called them a commando unit, because there were actually units called commandos. There was first commando, second commando, third commando. He didn't want to do that because he wanted to kind of hide the intention of his unit. So he called it the Special Air Service, which you would think would be about airplanes or something, had nothing to do with being a commando. But Sterling, in his unconventional nature, and his commandos raided Rommel's supply lines, and Rommel at one point in time, I think, called him the most dangerous man in North Africa. Now, Sterling was captured. I think he escaped and then was captured again. But quite a storied career, and of course the beginning of the SAS. But he had to have a motto for the SAS, and the motto that he came up with was "Who dares wins." And the implication, of course, being, look, you're going to have to take some risks if you want to win. Whatever winning looks like. If you want to win as a human being, if you want to win in your personal or your professional life, you are going to have to take some risks. And Sterling understood that.
I would recommend to you Killing Rommel. It's a fictionalization, but Pressfield is very good at his craft, as you are in The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. I want to talk about next Lieutenant Ralph Puckett, about whom I have never heard a word. A Medal of Honor recipient for valor in Korea, valor that is off the charts. Now, whenever I read an MOH citation, I'm always stunned. But I just can't believe I didn't know this. Bill Barber was a friend of mine, another Medal of Honor recipient from Chosen. But I never heard about Puckett. First, tell a story, and then we'll talk about the lesson that it illustrates.
Yeah, so Ralph Puckett, as you pointed out, was a young Army Ranger lieutenant in Korea. And they had been given the assignment to kind of take this hill, if you will. And as they advanced on the objective, all of a sudden they came under intense fire, and the Rangers couldn't identify where the fire was coming from, so that they could kind of counterattack. So Puckett made the decision: well, I will run in the open field. I'll run across the open field so that the Koreans and the Chinese will fire on him, and then my Rangers will know where the fire is coming from. So he got up out of his foxhole, ran across the open field, and of course people began to shoot at him. And his Rangers counterattacked, and then he runs back, and then he does this 3 separate times. Of course, he is wounded in the action at one point in time, but each time he runs across, the Rangers are then able to get a bead on the enemy. And as a result of that, he received initially the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award. It was later upgraded to a Medal of Honor. But he went on to serve in Vietnam as well, and had just a remarkably impressive career, and one of the most highly decorated Rangers of our time, and a wonderful, wonderful human being.
Now, I want to give an example of how The Wisdom of the Frog takes a great chapter like that, very readable, you learn something, and then condenses it. It's simple, you write. Foster a culture of action, allowing the rank and file to take the initiative and fix problems that need addressing. Accept the fact that this will lead to zealousness and the occasional screw up. This overenthusiasm is better than a culture of inaction. 3, praise those who attempt to solve problems on their own, even if the results are not as expected. Boy, if I could issue that to each of my students, I would. There are copyright issues there. I'm not going to get them all The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. I'm going to tell them to get it for themselves. But is the military as prepared to foster that culture of action today as it was in 2001? Or after 20 plus years of the long war, is there more hesitancy? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I can only tell you from the special operations community, I think they are just as engaged, just as willing to take risks, because that is part of our culture. The term for that chapter is sua sponte. And once again, that's a Ranger motto, and it means of your own accord. In other words, take the initiative, right? And so the young Rangers at a very young age are taught, look, you will get kind of mission orders, you will get the commander's guidance. But if you're a young Ranger sergeant with a small fire team out on the battlefield and you know what the general direction of the strategy is, hey, take the initiative and move out. And we want to create this culture in the military. Frankly, this is why when you see the Ukrainians and the difference between how the Ukrainians are fighting and how the Russians are fighting, it is a difference between the Soviet model that the Russians use, which is very hierarchical, and the Ukrainian model, which, the West has been training Ukraine since about 2014. And the first thing we did was say, you need a non-commissioned officers corps, and you need to make sure that your men are given the sense of initiative and are applauded for that initiative, because that will make you very agile on the battlefield. So to your question, yeah, I think the American military still has that as their culture, and we need to continue it.
Now, I want to thank, again, I don't want to give away too much. People need to go and buy The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, but I got to thank you for the Leon Panetta anecdote, simply because he said, call me Leon. I will never not call you Admiral. I will never not. James Mattis was at the Nixon Foundation. He said, call me Jim. And I said, General, sorry, I had a Marine father-in-law who was a colonel, and I went to his grave calling him Colonel. You don't do it. So you said to Mr. Panetta, that's not going to happen, Director. I believe, by the way, that is a very good custom for everyone to follow. What do you think?
Yeah, I certainly think, now the military is different, Hugh. As you well know, nowadays, when I'm out of uniform, I always introduce myself by my first name. I encourage people to call me by my first name. So frankly, you can build a closer relationship. And that's clearly what Leon Panetta was trying to do. But of course, I was a 3-star admiral and he was the director of the CIA. There was no way I was going to call him Leon. And of course, he laughed. If you know Director Panetta, Secretary Panetta, he's got this, just this gregarious, incredible personality. And so when he introduced him, he says, oh, call me Leon. I said, sir, that's not going to happen. And we both got a big laugh out of it.
The better story that even follows on that, I'm going to use that whenever I wave off people telling me, call me Joe. I'm going to use, Admiral McRaven wouldn't call Leon Panetta Leon, so I'm not going to call you Joe. The better lesson there is that when he goes around the table, you've worked with everyone at the CIA. I mean, everybody, it's a joke that he doesn't get because he's new to the agency and you've been working with these people forever. Takeaway, trust takes a long time to build. You got to be with people in the field. So how does a political transition every 4 years build trust between the political operatives who are necessary, they run the government, the constitutional order, and the professionals?
Yeah, fabulous question. I think the fact of the matter is the professionals in the military in particular, we understand this. We understand there's going to be a transition, and you have a new commander-in-chief, every 4 or 8 years. And my job as an officer and the job of the enlisted men and women is to make sure that we support the commander-in-chief, because that person is the duly elected representative of the U.S. people. I don't tell it in the book, but when I was running my 3-star command, at one point in time, I am briefing the White House, and there is President Bush and his entire cabinet. And 3 weeks later, it's President Obama and his entire cabinet. So you got to be flexible.
Admiral William McRaven, The Wisdom of the Bullfrog is already a bestseller. I congratulate you on it, and continued good fortune, and have a wonderful Easter. I will hopefully see you around soon.
I look forward to it, Hugh. Thanks.
Thank you, Admiral, and thanks all of you for listening today.